Okay, good afternoon everyone and welcome to today's ECA Technical Tuesdays webinar. Today we're joined by ECA Technical Managers Darren, Crannis and Curtis Jones to discuss the major proposed changes to the next amendment of the wiring regulations, Amendment 4. We will look at how these may impact your business and how to get involved and have your say. Just before I hand over to Darren to kick off today's presentation, you should see a question mark button on your screen now. Do please make use of this at any point in today's presentation, and we will try to answer as many as we can at the end. And finally, this session will be recorded and shared on ECA's YouTube channel and website in due course. I hope you enjoyed today's presentation. Over to you, Darren.
Good morning, or good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the presentation. So the ECA presentation today, we're going to talk about the proposed updates to our UK wiring regulations, or BS 7671, 18th edition, and this is the proposal for Amendment 4 draft for public comment. So for the next hour or so, we're going to go through this presentation, and do please answer questions because Curtis will be handling those towards the end of the session. First of all, let's introduce you. So what is a DPC? We're going to look through some of the changes, how to get involved and why this is really important for our members and the general public, how we can help, and a quick summary at the end. Really, we're sort of going to give you a quick tour through the Amendment 4 DPC today. We're going to have a future webinar with the technical team, so as a more of a discussion piece. So look out for this in the future, and that'll be available on sort of one of our technical Tuesdays as we go through this 3-month period. Throughout this presentation today, you'll see some little sort of styles in there. So something that's new is going to have a blue splodge. Okay, that's something new or major for noting. A question mark is really a discussion point. So that may have ramifications for your business. And then something's that gone or been deleted, that will obviously say gone. So obviously these are just some of the changes. They're not all the changes. So obviously please ask questions towards the end. So what is a DPC? Well, first of all, let's look at what is a standard. So a standard is a common approved framework for repeated use with rules and guidelines for designers. So it's designed to make our lives a lot easier as designers. Okay, they're not written by individuals. They're written by a committee, and it's achieved by consensus, and that's a committee view. And we'll highlight that more later. All UK standards are written using a standardisation document, and we call this BS 0 or BS 0, and this is the language of standard makers across the UK. Standards are written in a specific manner using specific words and meanings. They don't necessarily follow the Oxford English Dictionary, and we get a lot of comments about that, and it's not a lot we could really do, but we try. So consensus, a camel is a horse designed by a committee is the best way to put this. You don't always get exactly what you want, but a consensus is often a solution with the least resistance. So not everybody has to agree, but it's the one that we disagree with less. And that's how sort of national committees and British standards work in their drafting. So it's not an easy task, but I think this picture sort of highlights really what the committees sort of try to achieve. A standard is a constant development cycle. Okay, the draft for public comment is only part of that. So standards typically take about a 4 to 5 year process, and they sort of just keep going around a continual cycle of improvement. Where do we get new regulations from, or updated regulations from? Well, they come from the IEC, the international standards. They come from Senelec, which happens in Europe. Okay, and these feed into our national standard. And a lot of IEC and HD standards have been updated for this draft for public comments. And the UK British standards have to adopt that in a certain time period. Okay, draft for public comment, DPC, is one part of this process, and it's really important that we gain your feedback. In fact, it's the only time that sort of the general public and general users of the standard can give their feedback. So, draft for public comment. It's a stage, as we've just showed, in the standard of UK origin. your opportunity to make comments and suggestions on the draft. In this case, it's BS 7671. And if you want to know more about standards, the BSI has a pocket guide and there's a link on the screen at the moment. How can you comment? Well, it's already open. It opened on the 7th of August and it runs for 12 weeks. That's the max amount of time that a British standard can run for in DPC. And it will close on the 3rd of November this year. You can only access it via the BSI development portal, and there's a link at the moment on the screen, and there's a QR code later if you want to take a picture of that. Importantly, only comments on the changes will initially be considered. So in a draft for public comment, only the comments on the draft need to be considered. Other comments might be filed for a future amendment or addition. For members, you can email technical@eca.co.uk and we can compile your comments for you, and we can put those suggestions to our technical committee, who will decide on behalf of the ECA which comments we make to the BSI and the IET. However, if you want to make your own comments on the standard, you can, and all comments are considered by the JPAL committees. So if you wish to make a comment yourself, you can put that into the development portal, and all those comments are reviewed by the subcommittees. So when you go through and access to DPC, this is what it will look like. It's split into 4 parts for comments, and it clearly does state what section is for what, and there's a couple of PDFs in there you can download that splits the standard in half. It's quite a large one. So there's part 1, part 2 on PDF, and there's 4 parts you can make your comments. So please do make your comments into the DPC. Don't, whatever you do, start designing to the DPC, the Amendment 4 DPC, because it is only a draft. So the standard to use at the moment is quite clear, and the IT has got this great infographic on here. It's Amendment 2, so the brown book incorporating the corrigendum, and the bolt-on Amendment 3.3 PDF. Okay, that's the standard you should be designing to and installing to at the moment, and that will continue through until Amendment 4 is published, and the estimated time for that is sometime in 2026. We get a lot of feedback on how many amendments can there be. In Europe and international, there tends to be only 2. That's written into their drafting rules. In our drafting rules, there isn't. If you look right the way back through the history of what was the IEE regulations before it became a British standard, you'll see we've done this many, many, many times. Usually work to 3 or 4. However, there's no British standard to say how many amendments standards need to work to. So that's a sort of common myth. So let's get into the meats and the bones of the presentation now. So what are the proposed changes? This is not all the changes, but just the major ones. If you want a quick summary, then page 45 of the Amendment 4 DPC highlights all the changes, and that's in the introduction to Amendment 4 2026. So that'll give you a very brief overview of the changes. Important we quickly highlight our sort of verbal forms we use in BS 7671, or as I'd like to put here, 76761. Remember, when you read the DPC, it's the language of standards, okay? Shall is a requirement. A recommendation is not a requirement. It's an expression in the context of a document conveying that amongst several possibilities, one is recommended as a particularly suitable without mentioning of excluding others. A note is informative. It's helpful guidance to help explain the intent, and it's not a requirement. So these are in the rules of draft, and this is all sort of do with BS nought. So just remember, as you're reading through the draft, these are sort of the words you need to look out for. Skipped over part 1 because there's very, very little change there, but part 2, definitions. And we're going to start here because with new technologies, new definitions are needed. So there's a few new definitions here to look out for. Again, these aren't all of them. So battery systems. So a lot of these are related to battery systems and information technology. And here's just some of them here. So we talk about capacity, monoblocks, primary battery, diversity has been updated, firefighting shaft. That's a really important one, and we highlight sort of more later when we come through to protected escape routes. So that's now aligning with approved document B. A new earthing system has been proposed, potential neutral bonding, and you might have seen some features from the ECA on this. High risk building, HRB, that's been aligned with the Building Safety Act, and it's a lot more now with functional equidential bonding because of the high use of ICCT. We'll come on to that later on through the presentation. So there's a few definitions there which are sort of new or been updated. Let's look at the assessment for general sort of characteristics, so part 3. And a new note has been added to regulation 312.2.1. And it's just to be aware that if you're working on a TNS system, so predominantly in the LV network, probably sort of those under 100 amp, you may need to consider this TNCS, so PMB. And that's because the DNOs now, through engineering recommendation G12.5, which relates to PME networks and hybrid networks, they're repairing the networks with hybrid cables. So where you think traditionally using a lead sheath cable, and that's TNS, it's probably been repaired down the road and is now PME. So there's a little note there saying that you probably want to consider that to be TNCS PME, and you should inquire to the DNO, who potentially will confirm it's actually a PME network. So that's a most welcome note there. Something new, or is it? Okay, a new reference to protective neutral bonding, PMB. So this is a variation of TNCS, but it's not PME. PME is protective multiple earthing, where there's a source electrode and additional electrodes at regular points, where PMB is a single point earthing of the source, where only one connection at one point has been made. And we've got a presentation from the ECA, which is coming up on that one of our technical Tuesdays. And we're going to sort of give you more information on that. We've also got a great guidance note on that as well. So where can you find PMB? It's usually either found in rural locations or where they have client-owned transformers. So if you're used to larger supplies, this isn't a new thing for you. You'll often see a connection in the LV board. So PMB bonding has advantages. So where the source electrode is installed within the consumer's installation, so inside the panel board, PME conditions do not apply, and this can mean that TNS earthing and bonding can be adopted. We have a great technical guide on this on our ECA website, and we're going to follow this up with a technical Tuesday presentation. So that's a most welcome change. Let's move on to part 4 and highlight some of the changes here. A hot topic always is AFDDs. There are no changes to this regulation this time round, just a slight alignment of the wording to align with the Building Safety Act. So no changes proposed for AFDDs. I'm sure you'll be glad to hear. Protected escape routes. So we alluded to this earlier. So section 422 has been updated to refer to the term firefighting shaft, and it gives details of cables that meet the requirements for installation in a protected corridor. Appendix 13 part 1, which is cables in protected escape routes, has been completely rewritten with the assistance of a fire engineer, and this is to help align with the earlier corrigendum to amendment 2 and also to the building regulations. So you will note here that we've got clarification of what a firefighting shaft is, and that's in line with approved document B, BS quadruple 99991 and BS 5839. What's really important here is the fire engineer specifies classification of protected escape route. It's not up to the electrical designer. And you can see the different elements here and the components of what we call a firefighting shaft. New note has been added, so we're looking at protection as overcurrent here on regulation 430.1. So this talks about flexible cables. Okay, so essentially anything plugged in is outside the remit of BS 7671. So that means to say that anything plugged in should be manufactured and compliant to an assembly standard and not to BS 7671. And if that is the case, does this have ramifications for AFDDs? Are AFDDs there to design to protect the circuits, or are they there to protect the flexes and the users? It's been a long-term question we've had here at the ECA. What's your thoughts? So just a small update there on Things that are plugged in don't form part of the installation. It's quite a big change. Regulation 433.3.1, so admission for devices for protection against overload. This has been revised. However, the ECA believe there's an error in the redrafting. We think some of the wording from 433.3.1 and 433.2.2 have been interchanged. So we're not quite sure that this has been drafted correctly. In summary, protection against overload need not be provided where a conductor situated on the load side of the point where a reduction occurs in the value of current carrying capacity, where the conductor is effectively protected against overload by a protected device installed on the supply side of that point, or for a conductor which, because of the characteristics of the loader's supply, is not likely to carry overload current, provided that the conductor is protected against fault current in accordance with the requirements of section 434, or at the origin of the installation where the distributor provides an overload device that agrees that it affords protection to part of the installation between the origin and the main distribution point of the installation where further overload protection is provided, or a device for protection against overload need not be provided for circuits for telecommunications, control, signals, and the like. So we believe there's been sort of a mismatch of words here in drafting. I'd be really interested what your views on this. This is why we put the question mark there. So if you do have some comments on how these two regulations have been written, that's 433.3.1 and 433.2.2, please put them into the ECA. We can review that. Some things get deleted. So you'll see here that Annex B443 has been deleted or proposed to be deleted, and this is measures against electromagnetic disturbances. So that was an annex that related to the HV-LV distribution network and the supply to consumers' installations. And really that's outside the scope of the electrical designer, and that's why it was removed. For anything sort of ambient, you can refer to BSEN 62305, the lightning protection standard. That's really where they're going with this. Part 5 has seen the most changes. So selection and erection of equipment. Table 51 has been updated. So clarification of combined protective and functional conductors shall be green and yellow, and where purely functional, they are to be the colour pink. Functional bonded conductor has also been introduced. That is also pink. We'll come on to section 545 later. And a little note there about labels to be clearly and durably marked. Let's say this is the chapter 5 is where most of the changes now occur. A really interesting one for our members here is the regulation on ferromagnetic enclosures. So 521.5.1 has been completely redrafted, and it states that all circuits with a design current exceeding 200 amp shall be arranged so all conductors go through the same hole. Makes sense. Unless the manufacturer confirms that the assembly will not be affected by the temperature rise and verifies the enclosure's suitability. There is a note here as well that reflects this appears to be acceptable for circuits with design current not exceeded 200 amps. The ECA concerns here are manufacturers going to verify their enclosures for all situations? So for frequencies other than 50 hertz, okay, taking into account heating effects and harmonics, especially renewables on our networks, will this cause future problems when demand is placed on the installation? So it may be okay today, but when more demand is put on that network tomorrow, is it going to cause some problems? We believe at the ECA this is actually poor practice, and we'll be really interested in what your thoughts are too. Something that has been clarified. So this is installation of cables in escape routes. Is a new note to clarify the intent of the regulation is to support the cables and not hinder firefighting activities. It also notes that circuit integrity, so i.e. keeping the service running, okay, is addressed in chapter 56, and that's handled by other British standards like 5266, 5839 and 8519, so life safety systems. So again, it's keeping the cable supported, not to hinder firefighting activities, but it's not there to keep the service running. That's the job of other British standards. A much welcome change, and many of you may have seen this picture on the internet before. So a couple of changes here for cables buried in walls. The sort of circular argument of reading through the regulation has now proposed to go with a new table. So it's a most welcome change, and it brings clarity. Okay, so there's a new table there for when you can install cables in walls and when RCD protection is and isn't needed. So if a cable is at a depth greater than 50 millimeters, then RCD protection is not required. This table now clarifies that. And also the notes around prescribed zones has been tidied up, and that will allow what industry has been doing for years. So for example, the picture shows a light switch here and an isolator for a fan. Strictly speaking, how the wording is in the regulation at the moment doesn't permit this. So that's been clarified and cleaned up, ready for Amendment 4. The question to all our members here, would you like to see like a diagram in BS 7671, like the on-site guide about prescribed zones? Could we go further to help you out? Please let us know. A new table has been added. This is quite useful on sort of multi-wire, fine wire and very fine wire. So the conductor classes refers to different conductors constructed as classified in BSEN 60228. So this is quite a welcome change, just to give you clarification of what the conductors are. RCD types. So a new note has been added for RCD types to state that RCDs in series should be appropriate for load and fault currents. Also talks about selection and erection of RCDs. So type A's, B's and F should not be downstream of ACs. And a little note there about selectivity between type S devices and other devices as well. And a recommendation, especially where you've got, for example, TT earthing systems, where you might want to consider multi-pole devices, because obviously they will disconnect the neutral to prevent nuisance tripping in the event of fault. So this is sort of just clarifying really, really good engineering here. And for a long time here, our friends at Beamer have had a really good diagram here on where you should select and erect RCD. So you can see here that type B's and type F's are nowhere near those type A's. This is a really good download from Beamer. They've had this in their sort of RCD handbook for a while, so just confirming what good selection erection of RCDs really is, and this is mirrored in Amendment 4. Looking into coordination of control gear, so this used to be called current ratings, and it's now been renamed to, coordination between low voltage switchgear and control gear assembly and overload protective device. So it's got quite a large sort of title there, and this really brings clarity to the regulation when you select control gear or switch gear, and it follows how we design cables. Okay, so cables and protective devices need to be coordinated, so does switch gear and control gear. It's been rewritten to add clarity and say the principle is the same sort of principle we apply to cables. It does take into account load curtailment, providing certain conditions are met. We feel this is a great change, and it brings clarity to the regulation. Firefighter switches. So the regulation has been changed for the purpose of the DPC to allow your comments on the standard. We all know that firefighter switches have been used for a long time to disconnect high voltage. Typically they were in petrol forecourts with a neon sort of lighting, high voltage lighting. But that's not really the case so much with LEDs anymore. So firefighter switches can be used where firefighter engineers specify. That's the intent of this regulation. So do you feel this is useful? This is why we put a question mark on this. What areas do you feel would benefit from the use of sort of firefighter switches? We're thinking renewables here, battery storage, solar PV, EV, etc. Let us know your thoughts if you welcome a change for the ability for a fire engineer to specify a fire switch in certain locations. We really want to hear your thoughts on that one. Communication technology, so section or chapter 545. This is completely new. Really give it a new read. It goes into a lot of functional exponential bonding for ICT, goes into cross-sectional continuity, combined protective and functional requirements, and exponential bonding ring conductors. So you see this a lot in data centers. So those of you who work in telecommunications and data centers would have already seen these requirements. Anyway, there's some new terminology in there, sort of main functional earthing terminal, and this is bonding for functional, not safety requirements. So EMC, EMI, etc. So completely new into our standard. So new requirements under 551.7.1. So this is for generator sets. So first of all, there's been an update to this, and this was pre-amendment 3. So remember, the drafting takes a long time. So there has been a change there, which talks about energy flow, where it's bidirectional. A suitable protective device should be used. I think amendment 3 has clarified the requirements for that, so we probably don't need that text in here anymore. We talk about the source of supply should not be connected to the load side of any RCD, providing additional protection that is shared with other circuits. So, for example, where an RCCB on the load side is in a split load board, and you might have, for example, solar PV generator on that load side and also other circuit breakers. So is that the end of the split load board? Be interested to know your thoughts. Just something to note there that when RCDs are provided for additional protection, okay, in accordance with regulation 415.1, for circuits connecting any generator sets, there must be multi-pole disconnection. That includes the neutral. There's also been an update for the requirements of rated switchgear control gear when a generator, such as solar PV or battery storage, has been installed. So it's been clarified. So this may mean that you may have to increase the rating of your switchgear because of the load which is available on the bus bar, or you may be able to use certain switchgear with a lesser rated capacity, providing you meet certain conditions and manage the load. So there are updates to the regulation in terms of enclosures which support generators and final loads, and that's in regulation 511.7.2.2. So give that a look as well. New chapter here, 57, for stationary secondary batteries. Okay, a secondary battery is a rechargeable battery. A primary battery is non-rechargeable. So we get a few questions on that. So this is stationary secondary batteries, and it provides more requirements for stationary secondary battery installations where the designed purpose is for storage and supply to electrical installations. It does not cover things like UPS systems, central battery systems. It's not vehicle to grid or vehicle to home. It does cover things like protective earthing, protection against electric shock, you know, ADS, RCDs, DC protection requirements, isolation. Really give this a read. And it does put a nod out to a new PAS which is available, 63100. So that's a free download from the IET website, and that's about installing battery systems and avoiding, importantly, those loft spaces. Moving on to part 6, so inspection and testing. So for some of us, this is a bit of a nemesis. For some of us who really like it. So this is sort of part of my favourite section, if I'm honest. Some very minor changes to the regulations. As we talked about earlier, there are a new earthing system has been proposed. So PMB, so model forms have been updated for that. But the biggest impact is going to be ECAs, and we'll come on to that shortly. So for Appendix 6, guidance has been updated for people producing a report and recipients. Model forms have been updated, like we said, for PMB earthing arrangements and some other little tweaks. And importantly, the biggest change proposed is for ECAs. So the use of the FI code, the further investigation code, will no longer result in unsatisfactory report. So just to remind you, that code FI, further investigation, and the purpose of that code, and the ECA have a great video on this and a great webinar on this as well, which you can listen back to, is to allow the inspector more time to classify the potential defect for the purpose of the report. It's been felt that FIs are often abused, and in most cases, they are operational limitations and not code. So not being able to find a circuit is an operational limitation. So to clarify, only code 1s and code 2s will give rise to an unsatisfactory report, and the report has been modified to show that. Now's a good time to ask what your views are on codes. You know, should we have 4 codes? Should we have 2 codes? Now's your time to have a say. Also, alternative sources. We're installing solar PV, battery storage, other forms of generation. Would you like some room to record these and their earthing systems and their source electrodes? Again, the ECA have a suite of model forms. They are for alternative sources and verification of ADS. Have a look at those. So for ECA members today, you can already download these forms. Would you want to see those included? Love to hear your thoughts. So some of our favourite section now, this is a modification on the general rules. So part 7, special locations. First one is around swimming pools and other basins. So there's been an introduction here to hot tubs, which are installed outside. They may form part of 702. This is a may, so it's not a requirement, but a designer may want to consider 702 for outdoor hot tubs. Also sort of points there to following manufacturer's instructions. And as you'll see here as well, we've now included what we call religious fonts. So if you've got a church and you've got a religious font and you're going to be baptized, what you used to have to do is obviously get undressed, fill this with water as you go in, turn the light on so everyone can see what's happening. We sort of felt that light switch wasn't in the great position, and this is very common for these. So we sort of felt that there was a bit of a hole in the regulations, really. So the nod now to religious fonts has been included, and I'm sure this will please our friend Mr. Eddie Clements. Update here if you're involved with marinas and similar locations. So we're talking here that the protective conductor for the supply to the isolation transformer shall not be connected to the earth terminal in the socket outlet supplying the vessel. It makes sense, really. So if you are involved with marinas and similar locations, give this a read. And there's some really useful updates to the Annex 709, so the figures and diagrams sort of to help you through this, and also sort of highlights preventing galvanic circulating currents. Medical locations has had a huge update, and we're not going to go into that today, but we do suggest that you read it. It's been redrafted in line with international harmonized standards. This is a specialist location. If you are working in this area, then download the DPC and take a look and give us any feedback. But in summary, it's clarification. For Group 2 locations, must have 2 independent supplies and be supported by UPS. There's a new term for standing voltage. Really don't achieve disconnection time in adequate time, and that voltage needs to be held at a certain level. I think it's less than 25 volts AC. So examples of this are IT systems. And there's a new bonding certificate to record simultaneous accessible exposed conductive parts in Group 1 and Group 2 medical locations. And we'll highlight that one just shortly. So I think many of you seen the use of earth bonding bars. IHEAN came to the national committees and they wanted like an earth bonding certificate. So that's been designed by the committees and other people, and that's gone into the draft now. So that's a way of recording simultaneous the impedance of simultaneous accessible parts, typically in sort of operating theatres and things like that. So that's now in a new annex. Solar PV has had a little update. It's important to say here that the requirement for SPDs has not been removed. Remember, we talk about part 7 is a modification on the general rules. So the specific requirements for SPDs for the DC installation have been removed. However, these were always covered by the general rules. So it's just repetition of what's been there earlier on. So if you are protecting the installation against overvoltage on the AC circuits, you're not going to need to do that on the DC side. Okay, so Amendment 4 has just clarified these requirements. So they've not gone, they've always been there, they've just been in the general rules. Outdoor lighting. Amendment 2 brought around a lot of engineering challenges with outdoor lighting, especially in car parks, long circuits, runway, tunnel lighting, and it's just due to the capacitive effects of really, really long circuits. Some lighting circuits are easily a kilometre long, and an RCD would disconnect or trip on a perfectly sound electrical circuit. So all the examples now have been removed, the regulation has been shortened, and a new note to admit RC protection if the live conductors or equipment are either out of reach or locked in a secure enclosure of impact rating no less than IK08. So that's a most welcome change. It'd be great to hear your thoughts on that one. POE, a new section as it's a new technology. Is this in the electrician's remit now? Well, remember that POE now is approaching sort of 100 milliamp per port. This will power most laptops and TVs. Okay, so it's a really big thing. Could be a great new expansion area for those who are looking sort of upskill or offer new services to their clients. So again, give this section a good read. For everyone who likes to clog up the roads on a bank holiday weekend with your caravan or motorhome, for many, many years, you've been supplied with an orange cable to go between you and your hookup point. Once Amendment 4 is ratified, you can freely use that. So just a small update there to confirm that the orange cable will be acceptable. Just some small changes with 722 electric vehicle charging. The EV charge point isn't a sort of a 1363 socket outlet. It was never the intention for it to be one. So because that socket outlet for an EV is made to a specific British standard, so BSEN 62196-2, it's confirmed that AFDDs are not required to protect that socket outlet, unless the designer wants to put those in. There's an update to allow RDC PD devices. So these are protection devices which operate due to fault, rather than RDC DD, which only detects and trigger that to a device. So does this mean existing products on the market which use RDC PDs will become compliant in the future? It may well do. Does this mean that installing front RCDs may be a thing of the past? Maybe, depending on your wiring method. We'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback on this. Coming on to part 8, so we're getting towards the end now. Chapter 81 is a new chapter. It's not a lot at the moment, it's just a signpost, but expect this to be updated as international and harmonised standards develop. So at the moment, it's just a short signpost to approved documents in England, Wales, and technical books in Northern Ireland. But we do expect this to grow in the future. Appendix 4, so reference method D has been split to D1 and D2. So this is for cables buried in ducts and cables buried direct. So some small changes have been made to reflect this on the current carrying capacity tables. So just small update there in Appendix 4. Appendix 17 has been deleted. It's felt that this will be covered in guidance. The relevant parts of Appendix 17 have been moved to Chapter 82. It was only informative appendix, but it could still be potentially useful. Again, give us your thoughts. That's gone over what we see as the sort of major updates. Now it's really important to talk about how you can get involved and why this is important. The DPC opened on the 7th of August, so the other week, and it runs for a 12-week period, and it closes on the 3rd of November. You can access a DPC via the BSI website, and you need to register. You can follow the link on your screen at the moment. Again, we've got a QR code at the end. We want you to ask your designers, operatives, supervisors, qualifying supervisors, what impacts there may be on their projects and your business. The ECA are working with our technical committees and working groups to review the DPC, and we will be making comments against the draft standard. Importantly, if you don't agree with a proposed change and you don't submit your comments, then it will not be heard. You can only make comments on the changes. They will be considered for this drafting process. You may make comments on any part of the standard, however, that may not be considered for the drafting process. That might be left over for future committee works. ECA members can email technical@eca.co.uk and we'll compile your comments and suggestions and give them to the technical committee to discuss. We can't promise those comments will go into our final draft we put into the BSI. If you feel that strongly that your comment needs to be heard, then put it in directly. Okay, again, you can make comments and suggestions direct to the BSI standards development website, and importantly, all comments are considered by JPEL committee, so the joint power electoral committees. Important there that when you are making your comments, if you have a sort of real pain piece on that one, you can make a suggestion to how you want that regulation changed or modified. If you just write that something's very, very bad, then it will just be noted. If you say something's very, very, very bad because of this, X, Y, and Z, and it's got certain engineering challenges, and you provide a bit of a solution as much as you can, then that has a sort of much stronger consideration by the national committees. Importantly, how can we help? The ECA has representation on each JPEL subcommittee and on JPEL 64, so we can make sure that your views are heard. We run regular technical meetings with our members, including working groups and committees, and we've got lots of meetings scheduled in to review this draft and make proposals onto the DPC. Videos and presentations are available to members. This will be available on YouTube, and we're visiting all the regions. So speak to your regional managers and get this presentation booked in, okay? Your feedback is really important, so reach out to our technical team, or team technical as we like to call ourselves, and you can do this via our email, is probably best at technical@eca.co.uk. So for our members here today, or maybe potential members on the video today, the ECA offers all its members free expert technical helpline. You can ring that helpline today if you wish, tomorrow, 5 days a week, 9 till 5, including email. We have contracts, commercial and legal team, again, waiting for your call. Access to industry standards, risk assessments, method statements. We have discount to the BSI library. So I think that's 90 or so British standards. Doesn't include BS 7671, but includes stuff like 5266, 5839, etc. And also sort of our representation and lobbying for our members, access to events and CPD. So putting this all together, comment direct to the BSI, your input is absolutely vital. There's no point sitting there on the 4th of November not putting your comment in because it wouldn't have been heard. You can reach out to us at any time and contact us here at the ECA, and importantly, sort of have your say. This QR code is important at the moment. If you scan this QR code or take a photo of this QR code, it will link you through to the BSI development portal. So I'm going to leave this on the screen for a couple of minutes. So scan this QR code, it takes you through to the BSI development portal website. Alternatively, you can do a Google search for BSI standards development, and you can put the search term in there as BS space 7671, or just put in 7671, and it will get you to that earlier window that we showed you with the sort of 4 parts you can comment on. You'll need to log in, and you can download the proposed standard. It's in 2 PDFs, and then you can put your comments into the relevant section of the website. Please don't put your comments in on the final week, because everybody's going to put their comments in on the final week and the website will just slow right down. So if you do have some comments, for example, maybe on the colour of the book, you might want to get that in earlier than later. But we do encourage you to get your comments in sooner than later, because it's probably going to be sort of a bit lastminute.com with everyone going in the week before, and we won't want you to miss out. So hopefully you've had enough time now to scan that QR code. That will link you through to the standards development website. We do thank you all for listening, and this is sort of an education piece as well. So we have got a CPD certificate for you all to download. So again, I'm going to leave this QR code on the screen for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to bring Curtis back. Hopefully he's not fallen asleep or dropped off, for any questions and answers that we may have.
We'll make a start then, and we'll have a discussion on some of these. So a few members have questioned 521.5.1 with regards to cables entering ferromagnetic enclosures. So many seeing that as poor practice, questioning why change that. So I think we've just encouraged comments with regards to that.
Yes, I could see a sort of, I'll be interested to see how manufacturers are going to say this is going to be okay for cables. I think it's poor practice. ECA thinks it's poor practice. We don't believe that manufacturers are going to test their enclosures to take into account harmonics, temperature rise. So yes, ECA was certainly making a comment about this. We'd encourage our members, if they feel the same way, to make comments as well. Again, email us. We don't believe this is the right way industry should be going.
I think the next one is an actual question on that regulation. Would this need to be in writing from a manufacturer? So I believe this is where we're looking at where currents are in excess of 200 amps and cables are entering through separate holes within the enclosure. It will be down to the manufacturers to supply data that the temperature rise tests have been carried out.
I would expect verification from the manufacturer. They should produce that in writing. I think we talk about this as well, especially when we sort of talk about things with the RAG committee, that often when you get a phone call, it could just be the receptionist on the phone and they just may give you what they feel. You should follow it up with, yes, in writing or declaration you can download from, from their website to say that they've done the rise test. It may also be there's conditions on this. They may say it's okay between 100 amps and 400 amps, for example. So definitely, I still believe the best practice here is to follow what we've done all along, and that's sort of cables for a single entry. But again, I think the manufacturers would have to confirm this. I don't know any manufacturers who will confirm this at present.
Again, the same support with regards to the point you made on AFDDs, seeing that equipment plugged in being out of scope. So I think that was just a point made by one of the members there. Question now, firefighter switch. Can this switch via a contactor?
I believe that's how they're done at the moment, but what the intent of this is, the regulation was changed enough to allow your comments. So traditionally a firefighter switch is a firefighter switch, and it was designed for high voltage to disconnect sort of neon signage. That's not the case anymore, and we believe that more designers or firefighters want firefighter switches to disconnect things that could be a combustible source like battery storage, solar PV. So that's the intent of it, is to open it up to see what members want, what the general, what designers want firefighter switches to be used for. Can they be used for more things? How would you like them used? And do let us know.
Is there a need, so question relating to part 6 now, is there a need to bring back code 4, not to current regs, back into the standard?
Long talk about the old periodic inspection. I think it's quite, it's several years ago, the sort of 1, 2, 3 and 4. A lot of people used to love the code 4. Traditionally, I believe it moved away from that because there was no need to record those sort of things. If you feel strongly that you want a code 4, why not put a comment in? And again, that'll be looked at by the national committees.
Okay. A few other comments as such, supporting some changes with regards to the FI. One member has also questioned tip locks for earthing conductors is inadequate, in my opinion. A question you're like, I've heard the book will be pink. Is this true or a rumour? Probably a rumour that you started. But that is pretty much it, unless there's any last minute ones coming in.
Again, if you feel this, I mean, pardon the phrase from Michael Peace, these are model forms. Okay, so it's up to sort of industry, they're model forms. if you feel there needs to be more room for certain things, and you can design your own. Lots of people do this with software. If you do feel there's a sticking point and something's not clear, you know, come back and make those comments. In terms of will the book be pink, that hasn't been decided. Okay, that gets decided right at the end. But generally, the colour of the book follows the resistor colour code, although there was a slight change to the order of the resistor colour code a few years ago, or the table 51. And as you see, pink is a perfectly viable conductor these days. So again, you know, there's no decision on that yet. I'd like to see it pink.
And that's it, unless there's any last minute ones coming in.
So any comments that our members do have, again, you can reach us by email for our technical committees and working groups. We've got scheduled meetings in to go through the standard. I think that really, I mean, Curtis, you've looked through this as well. I think there's lots and lots of little changes that have been made over the last couple of years. A lot of this comes internationally as well, and there's obviously some new sections there. But there are sort of any sort of pain points that you feel, or clarification, or the wording doesn't quite make sense, then do let us know and have your comments, and hopefully they can be redrafted to make it clearer for you. We've got away lightly with questions. I think we can bring Kat back in.
Yeah, we're there on questions. There's nothing else dropped in. If you're still there.
Yes. Hello. All right. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. So you will be sent an email from us that will contain a link to download your professional development certificate if you haven't already scanned the QR code. But yeah, thank you, Darren and Curtis.